Hello, everybody. I'm a practicing therapist and I am also a doctoral student of psychology. Today, let's go over some of the ways that you can know to kind of signify if a relationship is in fact over. These characteristics may signify that a relationship is over. And we're going to break it up into a couple components. And the first one is kind of the signs that you feel. So emotional signs, personal signs that you feel that this relationship might be over. And it doesn't mean that the relationship necessarily has to end, but it might mean you might need to have a very important conversation to really get back on track. That's another thing to remember, okay? And these emotional, personal signs that you might feel is actually the first one. You actually might feel emotionally drained or numb after interactions. You might even feel kind of negative, right? You might, after the interactions, feel more worse than even before the interactions, which might end up where you start avoiding these interactions, right? You might feel like you're not being heard. You might feel frustrated. And sometimes if your partner is an avoidant individual, you might feel that you're not getting your needs met. And if that's the case, you might want to readjust your communication a little bit or adjust your expectations depending. And I'm not saying that's something you should do, but remember that avoidant individuals can be very slow to allowing people in. So sometimes if this is happening, it doesn't necessarily mean that your relationship is over, could be far from it, but you may need to readjust how you perceive them, which might mean that you may have to look at other ways to manage your expectations for the time being. The way you communicate might need to be adjusted. And I make videos on that in general on my main channel. So most of you guys already know what I mean. But if that still hasn't worked and you're still feeling very emotionally drained and numbed, regardless of attachment style, this might be a sign that there needs to be a serious conversation of what's going on, because relationships overall should add to you. Now, we all have moments where the relationship in of itself is not perfect, right? Might even be very stressful. But if overall you feel emotionally drained or numb after most interactions, this is a conversation that must happen, because both you guys are probably feeling like something needs to happen so you can save that relationship or walk away so both you guys can have a new perspective, right? The next one is actually that the resentment outweighs the affection you have towards that person. If it's hard for you to see them in a positive light, no matter how hard you try, this is something that needs to be communicated in a delicate way. You don't have to say, hey, I resent you, I'm starting to hate you. I really hope that's not what you say. But you could say something along the lines of, I'm starting to feel that we're in a more negative space than in a positive space. I'm feeling a little bit like my needs are not being met. I'm feeling like both of us are not getting what we want. How can we get on the same page? I don't mind adjusting my expectations, and I expect that you would probably do the same if I'm doing that. But what can we do to get ourselves back on track? Because I don't feel like this is good for either of us. Something along that line. Please curate it that's best fit for your relationship. That's just an example, okay? The next one is that you're no longer feeling safe being vulnerable. Maybe your partner yells at you when you're vulnerable. Maybe they shout at you. And if you come from a place of trauma, you might actually feel triggered and you might have flashbacks. You might feel terrified that these things are occurring. And if such the case, I would suggest that having a conversation with them, but maybe having it in a more safe space, because you never know where this situation is going to head to if you really feel terrified. Maybe you want to do it while you're in a public place. It doesn't mean you have to say it in front of everybody, but maybe a public, intimate corner in the coffee shop, but there's still people around, just so you can really recognize and protect yourself if needed, okay? The next one is you fantasize about being single, or you fantasize about somebody in particular frequently. Sometimes, and I'm not saying cheating is right or wrong, so please don't say that, feel that that's what I'm saying, but sometimes when you feel that you're not being treated properly in a relationship, you might feel comfortable maybe with that coworker who's really nice to you and hears you out, or maybe that guy friend that's always been there for you, or anybody that you starting to pick up feelings for or fantasizing being with, because you're missing that from your relationship and you're starting to feel more detached from your current relationship. And in general, you might feel that there's no support for your struggles. You feel like you're not being met with empathy. And when you communicate, you are continuously being dismissed no matter how hard you try. This is unfortunate and it's tricky because some people come from different perspectives. And I work with a lot of couples, by the way. Most of you guys might know that if you're from my main channel. I work with a lot of couples. And this one is actually pretty easy to see in couples therapy. Like immediately I can see that both of them don't see each other's sides and they're not having some mutual support. So this one is very, very, very fixable, but it's very hard if only one person wants to change. Both people have to meet in the middle to give each other the support, okay? The next section we're going to talk about is just about communication in general. If the relationship is over, often we're seeing more constant arguments that never get resolved, but are also having trouble putting it on the back burner. Because some relationships have arguments often. I would almost say every relationship has some type of argument that's always continuous, but it's not that big of a deal comparison to the entirety of the relationship. However, if one person or both is struggling to let something go and it never gets resolved, and you're not putting it on the shelf, or you're not, putting it on the back burner for the moment, and it's always continuously being brought up, this is actually creating an environment where it's very negative and very stressful. And so the relationship might be unhealthy to both of you guys. The next one is that there's a lot of the silent treatment for manipulation or passive aggressiveness, and this has become the norm. It happens every now and again with relationships. However, if your partner is giving you the silent treatment because you didn't give them the gift they wanted on their birthday, something like that, and now they give you the silent treatment and they're not talking to you for like 3 days, that is very manipulative, and that is not a situation you want to be in. And by this continuously happening, it will cut through your self-esteem, it'll disrupt your perspective of yourself and affect your self-worth. And so this one is very important that you have a conversation or, creating some sort of exit strategy, because this is unfortunate, okay? The next one is we're going to talk about actually the connection. Unfortunately, I would say that these ones can be very challenging to adjust. It does happen, but it takes a lot of work. But don't let this part discourage you, okay? That you don't miss each other at all when you're apart, even for long periods of time. In fact, you start feeling better. And the next one is that you're not growing together anymore. In fact, you're growing apart. This one is frightening, and I get that. There are ways to reintroduce it, but usually it's to fix all the other things that we talked about, and then you're going to start to see that. The next section we're going to talk about is kind of the unhealthy patterns that show up that might show the relationship is over or needs some serious adjusting. The lack of trust or repeated betrayals. Maybe one person or both have cheated on each other and it's continuous and nothing's showing improvement. This might be a conversation or something to really look at. Is this relationship worth it? Being hurt and mistreated constantly. The next one is controlling behaviors or attempts to isolate the other one, where I've seen couples where both of them do this. So I'm not just saying one person, both people could be doing it. And it can be resolved, but it takes a lot of work. Individuals are trying to control one another. There's a lot of isolation. There's a lot of up and down with the emotions. And a lot of times both individuals start feeling very afraid of the other person. That's the next step, right? The next sign. You might be afraid of your partner. You might feel small around them. You might feel like you're not valuable. You might be really afraid to voice your own perspective. And if this is happening, as I'd mentioned, talk to a trusted friend or have these conversations in a public setting and prepare for your exit strategy and tell people around you if you truly feel unsafe. And the next one is another internal perspective. And these are actually more like a clarification that you really feel like the relationship is over. You might feel more relief than sadness when you imagine a breakup. Genuinely. You might feel like you're mentally pretty much done. You just haven't left. And the last one is you've actually tried to fix things many, many times, and now you just don't even care if it gets fixed. And so I hope this video was helpful to somebody. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.